This in from Children's Health Defense. RFK Jr. rips CNN over claims on vaccines and placebo-controlled trials. What's happened here? Well, in a post on X, U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dismantled claims made in a June 6 CNN article stating that the news team identified, quote, 258 randomized controlled clinical trials of vaccines, and that more than half of those studies, being 153 of them, tested vaccines against placebos, and 127 of those studies used insert placebos. Below is the full unaltered text of Kennedy's post. So he says, yesterday, I retired 17 members of the ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. We did cover that yesterday and some of our concerns around some of the moves behind the scenes, so we encourage you to watch that if you haven't seen it yet. It says the CDC Gov external panel that wields the grave responsibility of adding new vaccines to the recommended childhood schedule. Over the coming days, I will use this platform to announce new members to populate ACIP. None of those individuals will be ideological anti-vaxxers. My question is, why wouldn't you want a mix of different kinds of people in there? But I digress. They will be highly credentialed physicians and scientists who will make extremely consequential public health determinations by applying evidence-based decision-making with objectivity and common sense. He says he's also going to be tweeting examples of the historical corruption at ACIP to help the public understand why this clean sweep was necessary. That's fantastic. He goes on to say that the most outrageous example of ACIP's malevolent malpractice has been its stubborn unwillingness to demand adequate safety trials before recommending new vaccines for our children. Well, that's also happened this week. The FDA has just approved a new injection without placebo-controlled trials. We'll get into that in a moment, though. Today, a compliant American child receives between 69 and 92 routine vaccines, depending on brand dictated dosage, from conception to 18 years of age. This is up from 11 shots in 1986. ACIP has recommended each of these additional jabs without requiring placebo-controlled trials for any of them. This means that no one can scientifically ascertain whether these products are averting more problems than they are causing. So then he goes into his deconstruction of CNN's claims. He says that they're wrong. No routine injected vaccine on CDC's schedule was licensed for children based on a placebo-controlled trial. In instances where a vaccine was used as a control, it too was never licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial. That is not conjecture. It is a fact based on FDA's clinical trial data. He says the 257 studies cited by CNN unwittingly reflect the lack of safety trials underpinning CDC's schedule. Despite CNN's worldwide effort to crowdsource trials with a placebo control, this list on its face reflects that 236 of the studies clearly did not use an inert safety comparator in a trial to license an injected routine vaccine for children on CDC's schedule. So he says for the remaining 21 studies, CNN's list claims used an inert injection. 9 plainly did not. He lists them there. For the remaining 12 listed studies, which may have had an inert injection, none was a trial relied upon to license a routine vaccine on CDC's childhood schedule. And you can see all of the examples that he gives there as well. He goes on to say, while these 12 studies were not relied upon to license a routine vaccine on the CDC's schedule, they do reflect that a placebo-controlled trial of a vaccine is possible. They also reflect what can be learned when a placebo trial is performed. For example, RCT 136 found that the vaccine was ineffective. RCT 122 found that severe adverse effects occurred in 69 recipients of vaccines compared with 1 recipient of placebo, and RCT 124 found the rate of hospitalization was actually higher in the vaccine group than in the placebo group. The unfortunate reality is that placebo-controlled trials, however, do not occur and have not been relied upon when FDA licenses vaccines for injection during childhood, or ACIP recommends the shot for addition to the CDC's routine schedule. He says that CNN would have reached the same conclusion if they'd reviewed the FDA documentation. He concludes by saying it's time to stop playing games such as CNN's false gotcha. We've gone from 3 routine injections by age 1 in 1986, the year the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act passed, to 25 routine injections by age 1 in 2025, which he says now does not include the COVID-19 vaccine, but that's not entirely true because it's still being recommended for unhealthy. Anyway, because of the 1986 Act, every one of these products, save one, was developed by companies knowing they would almost never be liable for serious harm. During this same period, chronic diseases in our children exploded, most of which are caused by immune system dysregulation. If we are to identify the exposures that are causing this epidemic of autoimmune diseases, we need to rule out products given dozens of times to young children, specifically to modify the immune system as potential culprits. Our infants and children deserve the best safety trials possible to keep them safe. We should care as much about every child who could be injured by one of these products as we do every child who could be injured by an infectious disease. We must protect all children. So those are very moving words, and we certainly all agree with them, but I'm interested to know how that squares up with this latest FDA approval. FDA approves meningococcal vaccine for infants without placebo-controlled trials. This seems to be a trend now at the FDA. They've expanded approval of Sanofi's meningococcal, a meningococcal vaccine, to include infants as young as 6 weeks old, even though 5.3% of infants who participated in clinical trials experienced a serious adverse event. The FDA approved the drug based on trials that compared meningococcal to a similar previously approved vaccine, not a placebo, in what attorney Aaron Siri called a, quote, vaccine safety pyramid scheme. So let's tell you a little bit about this. The FDA has expanded its approval for this injection. The vaccine, designed to protect against meningococcal disease, meningitis, and meningococcal septicemia, was previously recommended for children ages 2 and older. But according to the package insert, during the 6 months following the clinical trials, 5.3% of infants ages 6 weeks to 23 months who received the meningococcal shot experienced a serious adverse event. The FDA defines a serious adverse event as a reaction that leads to hospitalization, death, disability, or that requires intervention to prevent permanent damage or constitutes some other important medical event, such as breathing problems. The types of serious adverse events range from cardiac arrest, respiratory distress and failure, febrile convulsions and seizures, to a wide range of infections, according to reports on the clinicaltrials.gov website. Children's Health Defense senior scientist Karl Jablonowski said the reports of infections and convulsions indicate immune system dysfunction that could be linked to vaccination. So that is a very detailed article that we encourage everyone to read, including the comments from Aaron Siri on the matter. How can we lecture CNN about keeping children safe, especially on the topic of vaccines, while in the same breath expanding an approval to even younger children for an injection that has been linked, provably, to disabling or killing so many of them? Now, this isn't coming specifically from a blanket anti-vax perspective. This is coming from the concerns that many people all over the world, including RFK Jr., who has campaigned on vaccine concerns for decades. And yet now we're just approving vaccine after vaccine without placebo-controlled trials. It does seem rather contradictory to what placed him in this position in the first place. And it just seems odd and redundant that RFK Jr. deems it necessary to respond to CNN, which has truly become an irrelevant news outlet, while many key MAHA figures are screaming from the rooftops about the actual actions of the FDA, despite the words we keep hearing.